Welcome to another episode of the Para Cave podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Para Cave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to the Para Cave podcast, and welcome to episode number 2, or part 2 I should say, of Lee Addison, the Rugby League Coach. Now I hope you enjoyed part number 1, episode 466, so this will be episode 467, part number 2, but I really hope you enjoyed part number 1. It certainly was interesting, full of stories of how Lee got involved in rugby league, how he started coaching in rugby league, some very interesting stories there, also some interesting stories about Clint Gutherson as well. But look, this is part 2, some more great stories, especially about his book, something you may not know about Lee as well, so stay tuned for that one. It is really interesting and something that I'm going to have to probably catch up with him later on this year and have a chat about, because I'll be really interested about, to be honest. But also a unique, I guess you could call it, rugby league competition and his thoughts about that, something that would be great for the fans. But there's plenty more stories in there. His thoughts on my, I guess you could say, favourite Parramatta coach of all time, Brian Smith. So yeah, a little bit of talk about that, but yeah, plenty more in there. But thank you to everyone who listened to episode part number 1. I keep on getting that mixed up. Part number 1, I should say. Thank you very much to that. I had a great response to that, and if you like these episodes split in 2, please send me a message and let me know if that's the preferred way that you would like it, or if you would like it all at once, let me know that one as well. But look, there's not much more for me to say. You don't want to hear from me. You want to hear from the guest, Lee Addison, the Rugby League Coach. Don't forget, too, that he has his own podcast out as well called The Rugby League Coach. And also his book as well, Rugby League Coach, is available now on Amazon. So you can order that one and support Lee as well with that one, which is going gangbusters at the moment, apparently. So you can get that one and have a read of some of his coaching philosophies. There we go, I got that one out. But yeah, okay, enough of me talking. Let's get into the chat with Lee. And this is part number 2 of the Rugby League Coach, Mr. Lee Addison. I think he will become captain down at St George. They may go co-captains with Damien Cook, maybe potentially, but I think he will be captain down there. And another player who you have had an involvement with and potentially will be named as Parramatta's captain is Mitchell Moses. What sort of a player is Mitchell Moses? We all see him on the field. What's he like off the field?
Fine. I mean, I've not seen him for a long time, but He was fine. I've never coached a halfback before or since who could say, right, this is what I need you to do, blah, 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 blah. You keen for that? Yeah, I might throw this in. Yeah, okay. Off you. Yeah, well, let's have a look. And then he's just done it straight away. Full kit and caboodle, the whole set, the whole structure.
Okay.
Mitch Moses did that.
Yeah.
So, and I do think over the course of his career, I'm going to go down another rabbit hole here. The game has changed so much. We had the 10-metre rule introduced in the early 90s. Yet we still try and ask the same of so many of our halfbacks that your Sterlos and your Langers used to do.
Okay.
And your Mortimers and everyone else. It's a different game. There's 10-metre space between the players now. And quite often a good half can play really simply. One thing about Cooper Cronk, you never really noticed him in games unless you looked.
Okay, yeah.
Because he made other players look good. And he won an awful lot of trophies doing that. And I think the Sydney media in particular, there was a time, I don't know if this still happens, but there was a time when if Parramatta ran if Daily Telegraph ran Parramatta on the back page, their sales would jump 1%.
Oh, that still happens. Don't worry about that.
All right, there you go. So I'm very happy to be chatting to the editor of the Daily Telegraph today, Troy. But yeah, so the pressure around that, the media ecosystem, I think that did for Luke Brooks a fair bit too. And clubs get influenced by that. I mentor coaches, and one of the conversations I had with my coach, Ben, last night, I said, do you want a half who can just steer the team around and make others look good, or do you want a half to be like a quarterback who controls the whole thing? And so many coaches still want their half to be a quarterback who controls the whole thing. And that's why you will see some coaches berate their halfback in half-time or at full-time, naming no names. Yeah, but I've worked with one of them. And I don't think Mitchell Moses needs to be that kind of player. I think he can just pull the strings, move the team around. Also, his defense can be a bit scratchy too. So they're going to pick holes in him, whatever he does. Unfortunately.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Especially with Gutho not being there this year and Mitchell being there, I think, he's probably the main man. And I think
sorry to interrupt, Gus went on record, didn't he, on his podcast a couple of times the last season saying that without Mitchell Moses, they're nothing, essentially.
Yeah, and I think some fans, including myself, did see that at times as well. There was a lot of players thrown into that halfback position, moved into that halfback position, and just didn't see that. I know you probably won't like it, but the controlling part of it, managing the game, and we sort of saw Mitchell come to life last year especially in that State of Origin series. Where he guided New South Wales to the series win. Unfortunately, injury ruined his season, but hoping this year can...
I thought he was brilliant in Origin, and I don't think he overplayed his hand. That's my point. He just steered them around.
Yeah.
Whereas the Sydney media in particular, and it influences a lot of coaches, want them to pull rabbits out of hats.
Yeah.
And I don't think Mitchell is a rabbit out the hat kind of player. I think he's more of a steerer.
Yeah, I think that Origin Game 3 was obviously beside the grand final in 22, the biggest game that he ever played in, I think.
And I think he held himself really well. So a bit of a coming of age in that regard, I think, So, yeah, I mean, I do really respect Mitch as a player. I think he's a fantastic half. I think he's been coached and managed perfectly over the years? Probably not. I would like to have him see him have a bit more of a free reign. But if I ever criticise what Mitchell does, I'm criticising the coach that asked him to do it, rather than him, because players follow instructions, particularly at that level.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, you mentioned before that you got a little project happening. Now, I'm assuming that is a book that is coming out for release.
What a good guess. What a good guess. So, for the last 6 years ago, I started rugbyleaguecoach.com.au, which is essentially a Netflix for coaches and players to learn and blah, blah, blah. It's the biggest kind of its thing in the world, bigger than anything else. So I've become a bit notorious for that kind of thing. Basically have a full-time business in that. And the next extension of that was doing a podcast, so the Rugby League Coach podcast. I don't want to take any of your listeners away, but yeah, if you want to hear any more of me, Rugby League Coach podcast, which I bring out again on the 30th of January after a month hiatus. And the next extension of that has been to write a book. So what I did business-wise, right, I probably went to the nth degree of technology moving forward. And said to everyone, you don't need to have coaching person now. You can just have it online. And Rugby League wasn't necessarily ready for that, particularly the further you get away from the city. So over the years, I've been doing more old-fashioned things like doing clinics around the country,
Okay,
seminars in
yeah.
person, blah, 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 blah. And now I'm going really old-fashioned and writing a book. So, and I think that will be released in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
I'm going through the formatting and signing off stage of things now. It's written. And yeah, I mean, I don't think there's been a rugby league coaching book written for about 30 years. But this is a rugby league coaching book that is readable. There's anecdotes, there's stories, there's case studies and theories wrapped inside that. And then at the end of each chapter are some key points. And also, I tell my story throughout that as well, because I've had a unique sort of coaching background. I've done everything apart from literally coach in the NRL and coach in Super League. So, if there's one thing I can say about my own coaching career, I don't think there's a more unique CV
Okay. Yeah.
in rugby
yeah,
league. I
yeah,
honestly
yeah.
do. So, the World Cups and the Polish team, things like that. Like, so yeah. So Rugby League Coach, the book is called, and maybe I'll send you a copy or send you an e-copy so you can have a look for getting me on the pod.
Definitely. Well, let us know when it's out, and we'll give it
I
a
will.
plug for sure.
Nice one.
Definitely.
Nice one.
The only other rugby league coaching book that I can think of is I went looking in the garage the other day, and I found a Wally Lewis coaching book, Wally Lewis handbook. A few coaching techniques from probably about 1988 or something like that. So, it's been a long time since I've seen a coaching book. Now, as a rugby league coach, is it hard for you to watch rugby league games?
Yeah, I hate it.
And enjoy them?
One of my former assistants says I've got football autism.
Okay.
And I can't disagree. So I will sometimes watch a game for 20 minutes and it will frustrate me and I'll turn it off and put something else on. And the other thing that frustrates me is that in Australia, even though I've been here nearly 2 decades, I still don't understand why you don't play each other home and away twice, home and away each, or just play each other an equal amount of times. You have an equal amount of time. You take your best 36 players out of it in the middle of the year. And if you finish mid-ladder, you make the finals and coaches keep their jobs. And you don't have to win all your games and you can still win the premiership. It's crazy.
All right, let's go down that angle then. How many rounds is a perfect competition?
It depends which prism you are looking at it from. So if you are a administrator who wants to make money, you want as much content as possible to sell to the TV people. If you are a coach or a performance person, you want one game a week for maybe 22 weeks max.
Yeah.
So the truth is probably somewhere in between there. So what I would like to see is something like conferences. So a Sydney conference and an everyone else conference. And the game broken down. It's not that long ago we used to have a break for Origin and a break for internationals. I'd like to see the internationals come out. I think we just need to think laterally. I'd like to see the internationals come over in mid-year from England, etc. So when England, France, if they probably should stay at home for a while yet, but because they're not good enough. But if England or Great Britain want to come over in the middle of the Australian winter rather than at the end of the year. That's why we've got so many players dropping out of internationals. Australia, New Zealand play in the middle of the year, a 3-test series. The only end of year competitions I would have internationally are every 2 years. The Ashes tour, so the Australians would have to tour England every 4 years, and they'd have to play a World Cup. They're the only. So every other year you'd get a summer off, so that would benefit the players. And then they need to do something centrally so that the funds from those international origin games go back to the clubs, because the clubs will go against that because they want more of the money, because the clubs often hold the game to ransom.
That's true, yeah.
Because of the bargaining agreement. So, that's what I'd ideally like to see. And then with those conferences, it might be that for 2 years you do it Sydney Conference and the rest conference. But then in year 3, you might do a draw or a promotion and a relegation, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I think there's got to be some finer points thought about that. But ultimately, I think the conferences could be a way to go, because if Penrith play Para home and away, that'll be a big crowd. If Penrith and Para play the Bulldogs, big crowd. Cuts down on travel. Clubs will spend less money. Obviously, the clubs outside, so your Broncos, your Queenslands, your North Queensland, your Melbournes, they'll have to do big travel,
more, yeah.
But the game can help them out. And then you can start having Melbourne and Brisbane as a big city rivalry. Canberra is a city as well. So Newcastle, etc. So, yeah, I would like to see something like that. I'd like to see us think laterally, because we seem to be doing things just because we've done them for a while. Okay. I quite often will watch the first 4, 5, 6 rounds of NRL, and then I won't often. I'll take it or leave it until finals or close to finals.
Okay. Yeah.
Even the finals last year ended up being a little bit poor because they were so one-sided. And I was 8 out of 8 in tipping going into the grand final, but I tipped Melbourne. So, and I think that was the jeopardy was taken out because of so many things. This obsession with physicality that we have. So that could be another rabbit hole. Be a 7-hour podcast.
Well, happy to talk about that. We've seen PNG inducted in, I think it's 2027, into the competition. So that'll make 18 teams. Probably then 20 is the number that the NRL probably want.
Yeah.
Then you probably could have those 2 sort of conferences of 10 each. Maybe play each other twice in that conference and then finals.
Do you like it?
I don't know. I mean, I do agree that you should probably play everyone evenly in terms of definitely everyone plays everyone once, but then it just depends on those teams that you play twice. So,
I mean, you could with 20 teams, you could have 19 rounds and a bye for everyone, because you can play each other once, but then you only play them once. And I'm pretty convinced that if you go to Penrith, you're probably going to lose. But if you play Penrith in Leichhardt Oval, you might roll them. You know, like it's the home and away advantage.
Yeah, thing. True. I do like the idea of if they were thinking of TV rights and time, of stopping the competition and just having Origin, because then
I've worked it all out with dates, so you can basically do it in 3 weeks, I think. The other thing is, for all the other players who aren't playing in that, you can have a 9 circuit or something. But you can also have knockout tournaments. Do you remember those?
Oh, yes. The old
so
challenge and
so you could have a knockout tournament. So you could take your best players out for Origin, and then during that period, you could have the NRL clubs split into groups and they play a few fixtures, right?
Yeah.
And then the top 2 from each one of those groups, without their best players, would then go into the quarterfinals that happen during the international window, right?
Yeah.
So, in theory, the best players don't play. Can you imagine what that would do for some of the lower sides that don't have as many Origin players? They could end up winning this cup or going far in this cup. So it gives their fans something interesting to follow.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it gives them something to follow, enjoy. It's still rugby league. It's still their players playing, even though it's not the best players. People would still watch it.
And if you look at the patterns of other sports, We've just had the World Darts Championships where everybody in England and certain places was a darts fan for a week.
Yeah.
And then they won't be a darts fan for another year.
Yeah.
We have the Big Bash in cricket where everyone likes cricket. The crowds. I'm a member at the Gabba. And the crowds, the difference in the crowds at test matches and Big Bash is chalk and cheese. There's so many ladies, there's so many kids.
Yeah.
People you wouldn't normally associate with cricket are turning up to these Big Bash games because they like the event, they like the showpiece, they like the music, they like the fireworks, they like the show that is put on around the cricket. The players are hitting the ball as far as they can. It is called the Big Bash. It's not called the Big Block.
No.
And
That's it.
it's not called the cover drive. So if Rugby League can do something like that, and it might be this cup has slightly different rules. It might be this cup is 60 minutes.
Okay, yeah.
Or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, sort of do a T20 version of Rugby
Yeah.
League.
Yeah. But it's still Rugby League.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would love to see something like that thought laterally. Because if we produce content, the TV people will still want it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Can you imagine? You're a Para fan. Like, how were you feeling after round 8, round 9 last year when you were a Para fan?
Pretty disappointed.
Yeah.
Pretty flat.
This is going to be a long year. Yeah?
Yeah.
Right? Imagine you had a cup competition to focus on and you drew against Gold Coast Titans at home. How would you feel about that game?
Well, you'd still watch it, wouldn't you?
You'd be like, oh, we've got a chance. And then you win that, and then you win that. And then, next thing, we're in a semi-final.
Then you win some money as well.
Yeah. And again, this comes from my English experience. Like, Manchester City fan, right? Until we got purchased by the richest people on earth, we were terrible. And every year in January, you had a fresh start with the FA Cup. Every year.
Yeah.
And we've just had the FA Cup third round this weekend.
Yeah.
And everyone's excited. Teams that are not normally excited are excited. And there's a reason they've not changed it in England, because it works.
A funny thing, you mentioned the FA Cup. I've got a bet with a pommy mate of mine. He follows Tottenham, and obviously I follow Parramatta. And we made this bet. I think it was a $10 bet. Oh, it would have been about 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. And if Tottenham won the FA Cup, then I'd owe him the money. But then if Parramatta won the NRL competition, it would even itself out. But then if Tottenham didn't win, but Parramatta did, he'd owe me the money. Well, we haven't really kept the tabs on when the bet was made, and neither team have won the FA Cup or the NRL competition. So I think we're sitting up about $300, $400 or something ridiculous like that by now. We're going to have to work that one out. I'm just curious to know who's going to get there first. Hopefully it's Parramatta.
Yeah, with Ange at Spurs, they're the kind of team that can beat anybody on any day, but tend not to have a consistency in the league. So I have the feeling that they could win a cup somewhere along the line. So I don't know the intricacies of your bet, whether it has to be the FA Cup or just any cup, but...
Nah, just the FA Cup.
Oh, yeah, well, it's a good job you didn't say any cup, because they won the first leg of the League Cup in the semi-final.
Okay, yeah.
So they're 2 games away from winning that cup.
Yeah, okay. Nah, it was specifically the FA Cup, so...
There you go.
That's it. Well... Just a couple more. We see these days a lot of former players become coaches, and some make it into the NRL. Is there a player that you've coached from over the years that you think may transition down into the coaching role themselves?
So one in particular that I may have coached.
Yeah. Do you think there might be, or?
Adam Elliott.
Okay.
A big picture thinker. He was a leader at school. He's had his moments where he's done some silly things, but so have I, so no
is
judgment
everyone.
there. He is a big picture thinker, still. Quite smart. Very popular amongst players. He's not been a complete and utter standout NRL player in the sense that, again, I think the worst thing he did was stay at the Bulldogs for so long. I think they underutilized him. And yeah, if there's one, it'd be him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But it'll probably be someone I didn't have a clue about.
No, that's okay. We just see that happen these days a bit. When it comes to coaches in both England and Australia, who has been, in your opinion, the best ever coach? I mean, we hear names like Wayne Bennett, Jack Gibson has been super coaches. You mentioned Alex Ferguson in soccer before. Who do you think in rugby league?
Wayne Bennett, Craig Bellamy. I have reservations still about Trent Robbo. Not big ones, just enough. I feel that Des is potentially not moved with the times quite as much as he should have, but he's smart enough to as well. So let's see. I'm thinking back. There was a guy called Roy Francis, who was British, who ended up doing okay at North Sydney as well. He was the first black coach of any side, and actually probably suffered because of his skin colour back in that era. You're talking the 50s, 60s kind of era. And he was well ahead of his time in so many ways. But only certain people get those labels. So he was using video back then.
Okay, wow.
But if you listen to the talk, Jack Gibson was the first to really do video and whatnot.
Okay.
30 years later, 20 years later. So digging a bit deeper, I would say Roy Francis is up there. And you won't have heard about him because I only heard about him a couple of years ago. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And I've done some reading, got a book on him, read about him, and I think he's up there. I'm trying to think now of some British ones that Brian Noble was very good.
Yeah.
But I do think he fell down his own trap a little bit of thinking he was a guru rather than sticking to some of the principles that he should have done, that he did early. I think he fell down that trap a little bit. Another one who was very good but went off the rails a little bit was Ian Millward.
Okay, yeah.
He did really well at St. Helens. I actually think the coach that has been quite unlucky, who we probably should keep our eye on, but I just don't think he is a mercenary person in any way. He's just a really good fella. He's Justin Holbrook.
Okay, yeah.
So when he coached St. Helens, they didn't just win the competition, they obliterated the competition. Twice. And won trophies galore. The year after, Wolf took them over and scraped home in the grand final and then scraped home in the next grand final. So there was a drop. Okay. Matty Pete in England with Wigan is doing good things. Wigan is a funny, unique place, though. Sean Wayne did good things at Wigan. I think there's two jobs Sean Wayne can do really well: England and Wigan, because a lot of his coaching shtick is we're Wigan and this is what we stand for, and we're England and what we stand for. It's the same with Mal Meninga somewhat.
Okay, yeah.
it doesn't mean he can't work in other environments. But when he talks about playing for Australia as the Kangaroos coach, nobody else has toured England with Australia as much as Mal Meninga. Right? So when he talks about things like that, not many people have achieved what he has with Queensland as a player and a coach. His record in Origin will never be beaten. So if you all of a sudden were to plonk Mal Meninga at Hull FC in England, he'd probably not be quite as powerful.
Okay, yeah.
So that's my reservation a little bit about Pete. He's a Wigan lad in a Wigan system. And Wigan is one of those places that can sort of generate, a bit like Queensland, that can generate that sort of chip on the shoulder sort of thought as well. So the ones right now, Matty P and Justin Holbrook are the ones that I think you should keep a special eye on.
Where does one of my favourite coaches of all time fit in, Brian Smith?
He's a good one. He's a unique character. I went for an interview with him once at the Roosters. And he said to me, I remember seeing you on a sideline, Lee, and you did this, this, and this. I wasn't even on the sideline. I was sat in the grandstand.
Okay.
And if you read about Brian Smith and some of the things he used to do and you hear some of the things, apparently he did things to test people a lot. So I didn't know if he was testing me. And I just answered, no, I was sat in the grandstand, mate. And
Okay.
I think, right?
Yeah.
So he's a bit unique like that. And also he was going to be the America coach. And he appointed me again as his assistant because I'd been the assistant with it. And then he ended up stepping aside and Terry Matheson got the job. I think that Parramatta side in 01 was one of the best football sides I've seen. But if you look at the makeup of the squad, and I go back to Alex Ferguson's creed of the 3 blocks, I think they were lacking enough experienced heads there, and even some in their peak. It was just such a young side that were doing amazing things. And the final, they just literally buckled under the pressure. The first half, they just buckled under that pressure. And I think the difference between Smith and somebody like Wayne Bennett and Jack Gibson, they're very much more in touch with the human side of the game than Brian Smith is. And that's not me saying Brian Smith isn't in touch with humans, because he is. He's a good fella. But I think he sometimes went too much down the technical route. Because apparently he used to change his game plan every week quite significantly. And his son Rowan talks obsessively about skill development and stuff. Rowan went over to Leeds. I'm a big fan of Rowan as well. But he just tried to be too lateral of thought too quickly for a club like Leeds Rhinos that's been winning lots of trophies for 100 years. And I think I think Smith, the first Smith, Brian, was probably a little bit too far down that technical avenue. Because honestly, his teams, when they hummed, were unbelievable. But a couple of times a coach who is not known for his technicality, which is another thing, but he's not known for his technicality, and the skill levels were probably slightly lower, rolled both his St. George sides. Also, when Wayne Bennett was coaching St. George, they rolled his Roosters side. And everyone thought the Roosters would win, if you remember. So there's a lot more to this game than X's and O's and skills and whatnot. And I think it's a bit like boxing, right? You can either win a fight with technicality by dancing around the ring, or you can just bash the shit out of the person who's on the opposite side to you. And Michael Tyson always, he used the quote, everyone's got a plan until they get a punch in the face. And rugby league's got a bit of that too. And if your team can hold the ball, run harder, tackle harder than the opposition, and scramble harder and fight harder and kick chase harder and things like that, the rest is sometimes embellishment. It really is. Yeah. And because it's a very physical sport that we play. I sort of think it's boxing, and then it's the sports like rugby league underneath that are, your martial arts, and then boxing underneath. Rugby league underneath, I think, because at the end of the day, and this is one of my favourite quotes that I've made up myself, Einstein would have trouble coming out with one of his equations if 13 people were in a different coloured jersey trying to bash the shit out of him. Wouldn't he? He'd struggle to process,
that's
right?
a smart way of thinking of it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, and that's how I coach, basically, and I've got that in the book. So, and I think people like Wayne Bennett, Jack Gibson, etc., understand that. I mean, Wayne Bennett's still doing that now.
Yeah. That's it. And
apparently you can't.
For how long?
Yeah, and apparently you can't do technical coaching if you listen to the media and people like it's. But yeah, and I think Brian Smith was just too much the other way a little bit.
Yeah,
and it's funny. I remember meeting David Waite after I'd been with him in England with the RFL and stuff, and he was a different man.
Okay. Yeah.
And he was so amiable and nice and everything. And when I met him when I was in England, he was always trying to test me and challenge me. And I thought, shit, here's David Waite. And then when I saw him in Cronulla, he was like, oh, Lee, how you doing? So it just shows you some of the, what's the word I'm looking for? The pretense that can sometimes happen in the game, like the coaching gurus, if you know what I mean.
That's right, yeah. Well, we'll wrap things up with the set of 6, and the first question is probably a bit of a hard one, actually, because, I mean, you spent so much time in the game, but is there a favourite sport outside of rugby league?
It's either cricket or football, soccer. So my big passions are the England cricket team and Manchester City, in no particular order. Yeah, probably City. I mean, if I could do one thing, I'd rather be at a City game with my dad, yeah.
Well, you're up for a big year it's this year, sorry. The Ashes coming to Australia.
Yes. The Ashes are coming home.
The women's Ashes are happening now. Australia yesterday.
They kept dropping catches, England, yesterday in that game I saw in the background while I was working. So
it's always a great rivalry, that one, Australia versus England. So can't wait for later on in the year. If you weren't a rugby league coach, what career do you think you would have done during your life?
Well, I am a teacher by trade as well. Okay. But let's say coaching and teaching are the same thing. I actually think I could have been a lawyer.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd be a lot richer.
Definitely.
But I do have an eye for detail like that with things. So, yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, I think I could have been a lawyer.
What would be one unique thing people might not know about Lee Addison?
I'm making my boxing debut mid-year.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. There you go.
I'm a cricket geek, so I'm one of them who will sit and watch Sheffield Shield for. And I'm also a political geek, so quite often I'll sit and watch political things from British politics, American politics in particular. Yeah.
Okay.
There's 3 things really. Yeah.
Well, that doesn't matter. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Which 3 former either players or coaches that you've worked with do you think you wouldn't want to be stuck on a deserted island with?
Oh.
For whatever reason.
Paul Gallen's younger brother.
Okay.
He was a pest. I had him at Manly. He was an absolute... He never shut up. Like, he was just a pest.
Yeah.
A nice pest, but a pest. He's a good friend of mine. And I'll be hearing from him this week with regards to my book. But me and Matthew Elliott roomed in America. And we just weren't good roommates. I like to have a couple of pints at night time. He liked to sit there and study something or whatever. And I don't get me wrong, I study a lot too, but I work hard and I play harder, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And of course, when I'd gone for a couple of pints, I'd come back and crack a few farts when I was asleep, and I'd wake up with all these pillows on my head because he'd just be throwing pillows at me and said I snored too much because I had too many pints. So, me and him probably wouldn't go very well on a desert island. And then the third one is probably Des Hasler because I don't know if he ever switches off from football.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and I like to, I don't, yeah, I do sometimes. So, yeah. So Des Hasler, Matthew Elliott, and Paul Gallen's younger brother. There you go.
Nice. Bit of a two-part question. You're hosting a dinner party. What is your one meal specialty dish that you're going to cook for 3 people that you haven't met, dead or alive, that you would invite?
I'll just be ringing Uber Eats, mate. I'm the worst cook in history.
That's a fair answer. What would you order from Uber Eats?
Well, I'm a steak fan, so yeah, we're on the steaks. Garlic bread, chicken wings, steak.
Nice.
That's the way to go. Oysters, Kilpatrick. Let's go.
Yeah, that's the only way to have oysters, I reckon. Which 3 people that you haven't met, dead or alive, would you invite to this dinner party?
Alex Ferguson.
Yeah.
Pep Guardiola. Donald Trump.
Sport and politics, they don't mix.
And two football ones, no rugby league ones.
Yeah, that's different. I thought there would have been a rugby league person in there for sure, but that's okay. And the last one, favourite musician or band to listen to?
It's a tough one because I love music, but there's no particular album I have ever listened to front to back and I've gone, that's an amazing album. I've never done that in my life. iTunes was perfect for me because you can pick out the songs that you like. Yeah. So if I had to pick a band, I'm going to have to say something like the Rolling Stones because my dad brought me up on them. So therefore, a lot of those songs are implanted in my head.
Yeah.
But there's some Rolling Stones songs I hate. Like I wouldn't even play them if it was the last song on earth, So yeah, they're definitely not an artist or anything. My favourite song ever was Teardrops by Womack and Womack.
Oh yes, Womack and Womack, yes.
And honestly, if I was to press shuffle on my phone now, again, something else about me, I don't do Spotify or anything like that because I want to own my own music. Like I want it to still think it's like a vinyl collection, but it's on my phone.
Okay, yeah.
Also, I've refused to do Kindles and things like that. I must read a book.
Yeah.
And I still journal frantically too and write in diaries. It's not that I'm old fashioned. I've all the options. I've assessed them all, and I've gone back to the
Yeah, that one's the best for you.
Yeah. And it's the same with music. I'd like to own the music. I like to purchase, and I also believe in giving artists a bit of money for what they do. Like it's, and yeah, if I was to press shuffle on my phone, what would come up? I'll even try it now. Let's see what happens. Let's have a go. I mean, hopefully I don't mess your sound up, but I'll literally just press shuffle
and see what the first song comes.
The first song is Nowhere to Run by Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, which is a Motown song. After that is Let It Rock, featuring Lil Wayne and Kevin Rudolph. Hey Portia Nelly, Show Me Love, Robin S., Maggie May, Rod Stewart.
Rock and Rod.
Yeah, and then one summer, Daryl Braithwaite. I could keep going on, but you get the idea, don't you?
Yeah, there's some classics there, and from all different genres.
Yeah, and God knows what would come up if I press shuffle again, and that's just how I like it.
Yeah. No, that's a great way to look at it. Well, Lee Addison, thank you very much for joining me today on the Paracave podcast. we've spoken for nearly an hour and a half, and I absolutely loved it. We probably
No
could have
problem.
spoken for another hour and a half easily about rugby
I blame
league.
you. You're full of chat.
Well, yeah. No, I just ask the questions, sit back and listen.
No, I have fun. Thank you.
Listeners, check out the Rugby League Coach podcast as well, available on Spotify and Apple as well, and is on Instagram as well. And if you're in need of any rugby league coaching tips or sessions or things like that, head to rugbyleaguecoach.com.au. And don't forget also too that Lee's book will be coming out very shortly, and we'll let you know when that is out. So Lee, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Pt2 podcast. See you next time.